The quiet, picturesque town of Lakeland, Florida, had always seemed like the perfect place to raise a family. Tucked among lush trees and peaceful neighborhoods, it was the kind of place where neighbors smiled warmly, waved to one another from their porches, and left doors unlocked without hesitation. Families enjoyed weekend barbecues and children rode bicycles until twilight fell gently upon the streets. Crime was rare, and violent crime was nearly unheard of. Yet beneath that serene exterior, tragedy was about to erupt, shattering illusions of safety and sending shockwaves through the heart of the community. It began on a seemingly normal evening, as the gentle hum of crickets filled the air, mingling softly with the distant sounds of passing cars and murmured conversations drifting from nearby homes. Inside the modest, single-story Bellar family house, something was terribly wrong, though no one outside its walls had noticed yet. A quiet tension had been steadily building behind the closed curtains, invisible to everyone except those trapped within its walls. Wendy Bellar, a devoted mother known for her kindness and warm smile, had spent the day anxiously packing a suitcase that she never managed to carry beyond the threshold of her front door. A vague sense of dread had shadowed her every move, each step heavier than the last. Outside, dusk faded into a starless night, the darkness somehow thicker than usual. The Bellar household, which had always emanated a comforting glow, was now bathed in unsettling silence. At precisely 9:30 p.m., neighbors heard a faint disturbance, muffled by walls and distance. Then came something far more alarming. Multiple sharp cracks, unmistakable even to those who had never heard a gun fired in anger. Panic surged through neighboring homes as the abrupt, terrifying noises echoed and then stopped just as suddenly as they had begun. Minutes after the gunshots ceased, a frantic emergency call rang out through the dispatch center of the Lakeland Police Department. Yet before the dispatcher could grasp what was happening or extract vital information, the call abruptly disconnected, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. Responding quickly, police cruisers sped towards the normally peaceful neighborhood, their flashing red and blue lights slicing through the shadows, signaling the beginning of a night that none would soon forget. Arriving at the home, officers immediately sensed something deeply unsettling. The front door was slightly ajar, swinging gently back and forth with each gust of night air, creaking rhythmically as though welcoming visitors into a nightmare. Carefully stepping through the doorway, officers were greeted by a scene they would later describe as haunting. The suitcase Wendy had packed sat ominously by the entrance, untouched, a silent witness to her final moments. Further inside, the home bore signs of recent chaos: overturned furniture, scattered personal belongings, and faint traces of shattered glass glittered under flashlight beams. The officers' hearts pounded louder with each step deeper into the house. Near the hallway entrance, their worst fears materialized. Wendy lay lifeless, her body positioned tragically near her two small children, Ryan and baby Zach. All three had sustained fatal wounds, the cruelty of the act magnified by the innocence of the youngest victims. Officers, seasoned as they were, stood momentarily paralyzed by the senseless violence confronting them, struggling to reconcile the horror before their eyes with the peaceful family home they had passed countless times before. Yet the horror wasn't contained indoors. As they moved cautiously toward the backyard, beams of light from their flashlights pierced the night, illuminating a final grim discovery. On the lawn outside lay another body, a man identified immediately as Troy Ryan Bellar, Wendy's husband. A firearm rested ominously beside him. The obvious assumption began to take shape, but something subtle in the scene made investigators hesitate. Was Troy Bellar the perpetrator or a victim himself? The placement of his body, the angle of the weapon, even the disturbed grass beneath him whispered unanswered questions into the tense, chilled air. Amid the swirling confusion, a sudden shout from officers at the perimeter of the property jolted everyone to attention. Emerging from the shadows, trembling and clearly traumatized, was Nathan Bellar, Troy's 13-year-old son from a previous relationship. His face, pale and streaked with tears, carried a haunted look of someone who had witnessed the unimaginable. Despite officers' attempts to reassure him, Nathan could barely speak, stammering incoherently about running away, gunshots, and his desperate escape from an attacker whose identity remained unclear in his frightened, fragmented recollections. Neighbors watched helplessly from the sidewalks, horrified whispers mingling with sobs. The tranquil community forever changed by the incomprehensible tragedy unfolding in front of them. Television crews soon descended upon Lakeland, their camera lights penetrating the darkness like invasive spotlights, transforming a personal nightmare into public spectacle. By dawn, the shocking news of the Bellar family tragedy would spread through every household, coffee shop, and workplace in the county, leaving everyone desperate for answers to the chilling questions. Who was responsible, and how could something so horrendous happen in their peaceful town? As police cordoned off the scene, detectives arrived, beginning the painstaking process of piecing together evidence from shattered lives and silent clues. Little did they know that each piece they uncovered would reveal complexities deeper than anyone initially imagined, weaving a narrative that would not only test their skills as investigators, but force them to confront the dark, fragile truths hidden behind suburban tranquility. The Bellar family tragedy had only just begun to unfold, leaving in its wake a trail of broken lives, unanswered questions, and hidden motives waiting silently to be discovered. As the first pale streaks of dawn stretched across the horizon, Lakeland slowly awoke to a different reality. News trucks had crowded along the quiet street in front of the Bellar family home, their towering antennas reaching toward the early morning sky, capturing images of a house that would forever symbolize tragedy. Reporters with solemn expressions delivered updates on television screens across Florida, recounting the horrifying events of the previous night. In kitchens and living rooms, families watched in stunned disbelief, unable to reconcile the serene, familiar neighborhood on their screens with the unimaginable violence that had shattered its peace. Neighbors gathered outside the bright yellow caution tape that now encircled the home, murmuring quietly among themselves, eyes wide with shock and grief. Some held coffee cups tightly, their hands trembling slightly from something far deeper than the morning chill. They spoke in hushed voices about Wendy Bellar, the friendly woman who often greeted them warmly, the devoted mother whose laughter had once filled summer afternoons. Wendy, they recalled, had seemed perfectly normal just days before. Yet beneath their reminiscing lingered the unspoken question. Had they missed something crucial, something they should have noticed before tragedy struck? Detective James Carter arrived at the scene just after sunrise. A seasoned investigator, Carter had encountered plenty of violent crimes throughout his career, but nothing quite prepared him for the profound sadness he felt upon stepping onto this particular scene. The facade of the family home, with its neat landscaping and modest exterior, spoke loudly of everyday American life, a place where memories were supposed to be joyful, not tragic. Now those carefully tended flower beds were trampled by the feet of crime scene technicians, and the driveway, once a place for bicycles and chalk drawings, was occupied by police cruisers and forensic vans. Carter moved quietly through the house, taking in details that painted a clearer picture of the family who had lived and tragically died there. Framed photographs adorned nearly every surface, capturing moments of happiness frozen in time. Wendy smiling proudly beside Troy at a family barbecue. Ryan, their 8-year-old, holding up a fishing trophy with a toothy grin, and baby Zach nestled safely in Wendy's loving arms. It was unsettling, Carter thought, how normal and content they appeared, how oblivious they had been to the impending darkness. Yet as Carter's careful eyes examined the surroundings more closely, subtle but troubling signs became evident. In the master bedroom, the detective paused beside Wendy's open suitcase, noting its hurriedly packed contents. Clothes had been hastily thrown inside, shoes tossed without thought, toiletries stacked carelessly. This wasn't merely a suitcase prepared for a routine family trip. This was an urgent escape interrupted by an act of unimaginable violence. As investigators worked methodically, Carter sought clarity beyond the chaos, tracing the family's recent past. Neighbors and close friends reluctantly began sharing fragments of unsettling truths. Wendy, it seemed, had been quietly troubled for weeks. At local gatherings, she had become noticeably withdrawn, her laughter less frequent, her smiles forced and fleeting. She confided vaguely in a close friend about stress at home, arguments that seemed increasingly frequent and intense. But Wendy had never elaborated beyond that, as if fearful of revealing the full extent of her concerns. Meanwhile, Troy Bellar remained an enigma even to those who had known him longest. Described by some as friendly, helpful, and an involved father, others noted subtle changes in recent weeks. Troy had grown unusually distant, his once easygoing demeanor now replaced by tension and a simmering impatience. Financial strain seemed evident. Whispered hints of debt and employment instability were circulating quietly. Troy had always projected confidence and self-reliance, but neighbors now admitted they'd noticed the signs of mounting pressure, which had gone ignored or dismissed as temporary. Carter listened carefully, taking notes, assembling the scattered puzzle pieces one by one. He could feel an uncomfortable pattern emerging, yet resisted jumping prematurely to conclusions. There remained gaps, important details that eluded him. Most notably, why had Wendy chosen to flee that particular night, and what precisely triggered the violent climax that devastated an entire family? The detective's thoughts returned frequently to young Nathan, the surviving son whose traumatic escape had left him deeply shaken. Nathan had become a critical witness, yet the boy was emotionally fragile, his memory clouded by shock and fear. He had offered fragments, mentioning loud voices, sudden shouting, his stepmother Wendy frantically gathering clothes, but nothing coherent enough to form a solid narrative. Carter recognized the importance of patience in situations like these. Forcing details from the traumatized child could obscure the truth rather than clarify it. Nathan would need time to recover, to regain trust, before revealing precisely what he had seen or heard. In the meantime, forensic investigators meticulously documented the crime scene, every detail carefully recorded, every item tagged and photographed. Blood patterns were analyzed, bullet trajectories traced meticulously through walls and furnishings. Each piece of evidence was quietly cataloged, awaiting laboratory examination that might offer crucial answers, or perhaps raise even more unsettling questions. By evening, news of the tragedy spread far beyond Lakeland, gripping viewers statewide and drawing national attention. The Bellar family story resonated deeply, a stark reminder that hidden turmoil could exist even in the most ordinary homes. Television stations replayed snippets of footage throughout the night, juxtaposing joyful family images with stark scenes of police activity, compelling millions to grapple with the chilling juxtaposition of outward happiness and internal despair. Late that night, Detective Carter stood silently outside the Bellar residence, surveying the scene once more beneath dim streetlights. He considered carefully the unsettling contradictions the day had revealed: Wendy's secretive preparations to flee, Troy's increasingly erratic behavior, Nathan's haunting yet incomplete testimony, and the neighbors' guarded whispers about mounting pressures and hidden tensions. Carter felt strongly that beneath the horror visible to everyone lay a more complicated, perhaps even darker story yet to be uncovered. As he turned away from the quiet house now shadowed by tragedy, Detective Carter knew one thing for certain. Unraveling the full truth about what happened within these walls would require confronting uncomfortable realities. Lakeland's peaceful facade had cracked wide open, exposing vulnerabilities many preferred not to acknowledge. The investigation had barely begun, but already Carter understood that the path to answers would test not only his skills as a detective, but the very conscience of the community itself. Nightmares have a way of lingering long after the dreamer awakens, and for the small town of Lakeland, the nightmare had only just begun. Days passed, but the community remained gripped by a suffocating sense of dread. Families locked their doors tight, neighbors exchanged tense glances, and whispered conversations persisted behind drawn curtains. The peaceful, trusting atmosphere that once defined Lakeland had dissolved overnight, replaced by unease and suspicion. Detective James Carter stood inside the quiet interrogation room, the gentle hum of fluorescent lights overhead offering no comfort. Nathan Bellar, the only survivor of the horrific events, sat quietly across the table. The 13-year-old boy appeared fragile, his posture curled inward, eyes downcast, hands trembling slightly in his lap. Carter could sense the weight of fear and confusion that burdened Nathan, yet he needed answers. This child had witnessed something vital, something that could begin to unravel the tangled threads of tragedy. As Carter gently coaxed Nathan's fragmented memories to the surface, scenes from the night began to take shape, painful in their clarity. Nathan described an evening that had started as normal as any other. Family dinner, homework, cartoons playing softly in the background. Yet beneath the ordinary surface lurked an uneasy tension he had felt, but couldn't fully explain. He recalled how Wendy's smiles had seemed forced, how Troy's voice carried an unusual sharpness. Something was profoundly wrong, though Nathan lacked the words to fully express the magnitude of his unease. Then as Nathan's voice quivered with anxiety, the evening erupted into chaos. He vividly remembered sudden shouting from the master bedroom, doors slamming violently, the unmistakable sound of Wendy's frantic footsteps as she moved hurriedly through the house. Panic began rising inside Nathan again, his breathing quickening as memories flooded back. Detective Carter patiently encouraged him to slow down, to breathe, allowing space for the traumatic moments to surface gradually. Nathan recounted with chilling precision the sound of the suitcase being dragged hastily toward the front door. Wendy pleading urgently with Troy, her voice strained and desperate. Then came the sound he would never forget, the sharp metallic click of a firearm being loaded somewhere inside the house. Fear seized Nathan instantly, forcing his heart into a painful rhythm as he scrambled instinctively toward his younger brother's room. Before he could reach them, gunshots rang out, explosive and terrifyingly close. Nathan's descriptions became fragmented again, memories broken into flashes. Wendy screaming, the thunderous shots piercing the air, and then chilling silence. Fear overwhelmed him. His survival instincts took over. He described diving through a window, shards of glass cutting into his skin as he landed painfully on damp grass, rolling away quickly into the shadows. Adrenaline carried him forward, his bare feet pounding across the yard, every muscle screaming with urgency as he fled blindly into the night. As Carter absorbed Nathan's account, he noted critical details, the desperate attempt to flee, the gunshots following closely behind, and a chilling realization. The shooter had noticed Nathan escaping and had fired directly at him. Nathan's survival had hinged on mere inches, a bullet grazing a nearby tree, embedding itself deep into the bark instead of the terrified boy. This realization amplified the brutality of the crime and raised unsettling questions. Who exactly had been wielding the gun, and why target an innocent child? Meanwhile, forensic investigators meticulously pieced together the night's violent timeline inside the Bellar residence. Bullet holes were documented carefully, shell casings marked and cataloged, blood spatter patterns analyzed. Carter moved slowly through the crime scene once more, reconstructing the harrowing events with forensic precision. His flashlight illuminated tiny, overlooked details, the position of Wendy's body, her arms outstretched protectively toward her fallen children, the scattered belongings across the floor, indicative of a hurried, panicked attempt to escape. Yet amid the mounting evidence, confusion remained. Troy Bellar's body, found outside the home with a firearm nearby, suggested a simple narrative. But Carter felt uneasy. Subtle inconsistencies nagged at him, like the angle of Troy's fatal injury, the odd positioning of his body on the grass, and the fact that no clear motive had emerged. There was something not yet revealed, something hidden deep beneath layers of blood, terror, and silence. Further complicating matters was the revelation from neighbors who described seeing a mysterious figure near the house shortly before the shooting. A shadowy stranger had reportedly moved quietly through adjacent yards, blending seamlessly into the night. This figure added a disturbing layer of uncertainty. Could there have been another individual involved? If so, who was this unseen presence, and what role had they played in the unfolding horror? The discovery of these unsettling details spread rapidly, intensifying anxiety throughout Lakeland. Every resident felt implicated in the mystery, struggling to grasp how such violence could erupt without warning in their midst. Detectives carefully canvassed the neighborhood, questioning residents repeatedly, hoping each conversation would bring clarity. Yet each testimony seemed to deepen the mystery further, adding more questions rather than answers. As days passed, Detective Carter felt the heavy weight of responsibility pressing upon him. Sleep became elusive, his mind haunted by the images of Wendy, Ryan, and Zach, lives stolen violently, inexplicably. He knew answers would not come easily, yet vowed silently to uncover the truth, no matter how deeply it might be hidden or how uncomfortable it might prove to be. For Nathan Bellar, life had irrevocably changed. No longer just a boy enjoying innocent days filled with friends and laughter, he now became the quiet, haunted figure whom neighbors spoke about in hushed tones. The protective shield of childhood had shattered in an instant, replaced by trauma that would linger long after wounds healed and headlines faded. Lakeland itself stood at the brink of an unsettling transformation. Gone was the idyllic community, replaced by suspicion, fear, and a painful awareness of vulnerability. Locked doors and wary glances replaced easy waves and friendly smiles. The tragedy had exposed a fragile truth. Beneath the surface of every town, no matter how peaceful, lay vulnerabilities that could erupt into violence at any moment. As Carter left the interrogation room, stepping out into the cool night air, his mind continued to spin with unanswered questions. Nathan's testimony had provided vital fragments of truth, yet the puzzle remained painfully incomplete. Somewhere in the darkness, answers waited, hidden, elusive, and profoundly unsettling. The detective glanced back briefly toward the Bellar home. Silhouetted in moonlight, its windows darkened, eerily silent. The truth, Carter thought grimly, often revealed itself only slowly, piece by painful piece, and when it finally emerged, it was rarely comforting. In the aftermath of tragedy, time rarely moves swiftly. Days stretched painfully long in Lakeland, each hour seeming heavier than the last. Detective James Carter remained determined, relentlessly sifting through fragments of information, each clue both vital and maddeningly elusive. Public curiosity intensified, the community's thirst for answers growing stronger, as the shadow of uncertainty loomed large over the once quiet town. Inside the Bellar family home, crime scene technicians continued their painstaking work, meticulously cataloging even the smallest details. Under the stark illumination of portable lights, each room revealed its own quiet story. Furniture overturned in panic, family photographs knocked askew, and children's toys scattered across carpets now marred by faint stains of evidence markers. Carter moved slowly, absorbing every detail, knowing the truth was often hidden within subtleties easily overlooked. He paused by Wendy's suitcase once more, the open lid revealing items hastily packed, clothes wrinkled in desperation, toiletries carelessly tossed in. Something struck him as peculiar. Wendy had prepared carefully, yet no car keys were among her belongings. Her vehicle remained parked outside, untouched. Why would she attempt to flee without her means of escape? Carter felt an unsettling doubt tugging at his thoughts, challenging assumptions he'd previously accepted without question. As forensic experts expanded their search, additional anomalies emerged. Bullet trajectories traced through walls suggested an erratic firing pattern, indicative not of precision or calculation, but of panic and rage. Most perplexing was the discovery of shell casings in two separate rooms, hinting at movement, pursuit, and confrontation spreading through the home. This detail disturbed Carter deeply. Had Wendy been chased throughout her own house? If so, why were none of the neighbors aware of prolonged shouting or struggle prior to the shooting? For Carter, the contradictions multiplied. Another key puzzle emerged outside on the lawn, where Troy Bellar's body had been found. Forensic technicians noted subtle inconsistencies in the positioning of the firearm near Troy's hand. Its placement appeared oddly deliberate, almost staged. Furthermore, initial forensic analysis raised doubts about the angle of Troy's fatal wound, suggesting complexities that defied the simplest explanation of suicide. Carter found himself returning again and again to a troubling question. Had Troy died by his own hand, or had someone carefully manufactured this scenario to obscure a darker truth? Amid the growing confusion, Detective Carter turned his attention outward, expanding the investigation beyond the family itself. The figure reportedly seen by neighbors on the night of the tragedy, a shadowy individual lurking near the Bellar property, became increasingly significant. Officers combed through hours of footage from nearby security cameras, hoping for a glimpse of the unknown visitor. After painstaking review, an unsettling grainy image emerged. a figure dressed in dark clothing, moving cautiously through yards, disappearing into shadows mere minutes before gunshots pierced the night. The presence of this unidentified individual ignited speculation and alarm. Investigators quietly canvassed Lakeland once more, pressing neighbors for memories, descriptions, anything to link this elusive stranger to the tragedy. Yet each account remained frustratingly vague. Dark clothing, a hood obscuring facial features, movements deliberate yet unhurried. With each inconclusive interview, Carter's frustration deepened. The puzzle seemed determined to resist solving. Further complicating matters was Nathan's fragile testimony. The traumatized boy recalled hearing voices, multiple voices, yet he could neither clearly identify them nor articulate their exact words. His fragmented memories hinted at a broader conflict occurring before gunfire erupted. Nathan's account suggested multiple layers of tension, an argument escalating into confrontation, but details remained elusive, obscured by trauma. To build a clearer narrative, Carter began exploring digital evidence. Technicians examined phone records, discovering that Wendy had repeatedly contacted a close friend earlier in the week, each call lasting only minutes, yet occurring with increasing frequency and urgency. Additionally, Wendy's text messages hinted at deep distress. Phrases like, "I can't do this anymore," and "I need to leave" appeared repeatedly, painting a portrait of escalating desperation. Yet Carter knew the picture remained incomplete without context. What precisely had Wendy feared? Was Troy's erratic behavior the sole catalyst, or had other pressures lurked quietly beneath the surface? Investigators discovered troubling financial records, overdue bills, late mortgage payments, and debt notices, hidden discreetly among household papers. Troy's finances had been spiraling out of control, further straining the family's stability. Amid this turmoil, another twist surfaced, fueling further suspicion. Detectives found evidence that Troy had purchased the firearm only days before the tragedy, raising troubling implications. Had he planned something sinister, or had fear driven him to desperate measures? The weapon's recent acquisition raised alarms, suggesting either premeditation or an acute response to a perceived threat. Yet the truth remained painfully obscure. With each passing day, public speculation intensified, and the community's anxiety deepened. Television broadcasts revisited the story constantly, dissecting every new detail, every subtle contradiction, adding pressure to a case already burdened by complexity. Carter felt the mounting strain of expectations, knowing each unanswered question weakened Lakeland's fragile sense of security. Late one evening, Carter stood again outside the Bellar home, the darkness heavy and silent around him. He pondered the evidence once more: the hastily packed suitcase, Wendy's desperate messages, the enigmatic figure captured on the security footage, the oddly placed firearm, Nathan's fragmented memories, and felt a surge of frustration. Every clue pointed toward an unsettling truth, yet none provided clarity. He knew that somewhere, hidden among these contradictions, lay the key to unraveling this tragic mystery. As Carter prepared to leave the crime scene behind for the night, a thought resonated deeply within him. The truth was rarely simple, often uncomfortable, and sometimes impossible to predict. The investigation had only just begun, but already its complexity seemed poised to overwhelm even the most careful detective. The peaceful streets of Lakeland, so familiar yet now tinged with sorrow, seemed to silently echo the town's shared confusion. Carter vowed to push forward, knowing the path to answers would test every instinct, every skill he possessed, and that before clarity could emerge, darker revelations might surface, challenging everything he believed about the case. Detective James Carter knew that behind every crime, behind every moment of violence, lay a deeper story, one shaped by secrets, fears, and hidden burdens. He now stood in the quiet office late at night, surrounded by files, documents, and photographs from the Bellar family tragedy. His eyes were heavy from exhaustion, yet sleep felt impossible. Every new clue seemed to cast longer shadows, plunging him further into a labyrinthine mystery that refused easy answers. He turned his attention toward Wendy's past, recognizing that the events leading to tragedy rarely occurred suddenly. Violence like this usually simmered quietly beneath the surface, festering over time. Carter's instinct told him that somewhere in Wendy's history lay a piece of the puzzle he desperately needed. Investigators quietly retraced Wendy's footsteps in the months and weeks before her death, interviewing close friends, relatives, and coworkers. The image that began to form was of a woman increasingly trapped in silent despair, carefully concealing her troubles behind practiced smiles and superficial normality. Friends described subtle but telling changes, moments when Wendy would withdraw abruptly, excusing herself from social gatherings without explanation, or showing sudden nervousness when her phone rang unexpectedly. As Carter studied Wendy's digital footprints, he found hints of suppressed turmoil. Social media profiles showed fewer posts, a noticeable withdrawal from interactions that had previously been cheerful and frequent. A series of deleted emails, recovered painstakingly by forensic analysts, revealed brief exchanges with a counselor about marital issues and anxiety. Yet Wendy had abruptly ceased these communications just weeks before the tragedy, as if afraid someone might discover her attempts to seek help. While Wendy's secrets began emerging slowly, Troy's past proved equally troubling, filled with tensions long hidden beneath his image of strength and composure. Neighbors had always described Troy as friendly and composed, yet deeper digging revealed a complicated personality. Carter's team uncovered minor past incidents, arguments with coworkers, subtle signs of volatility, hinting at a man struggling beneath the weight of expectations and failures. Digging deeper, detectives discovered that Troy's financial stress had intensified dramatically in the months before the tragedy. His employment had been precarious, with unexplained absences from work, repeated warnings from supervisors, and mounting debts. Bank records revealed desperate financial transactions, frequent small loans from payday lenders, withdrawals from savings accounts, unpaid medical bills. Troy's burden had quietly grown, hidden behind his facade of confident stability. Most troubling to Carter, however, was the revelation of Troy's recent purchase of the firearm, a fact that continued to gnaw at him. Interviews at the gun store confirmed Troy appeared anxious during the transaction, avoiding eye contact and exhibiting nervous behaviors uncommon among typical buyers. This hinted at internal conflict, a hesitation rooted in deeper fears or uncertainties. What had driven Troy, in those tense days before tragedy, to feel he needed such dangerous protection, or was it something more sinister? But the complexity didn't end there. Detectives uncovered further tension within the family dynamic itself, centering around Nathan, Troy's son from a previous relationship. Friends and family described Nathan's relationship with Wendy as warm, but occasionally strained. While Nathan had never openly displayed resentment, subtle frictions simmered beneath their interactions. Nathan's biological mother had moved away years before, leaving Wendy to fill a parental role that wasn't always easily navigated. Could underlying family friction have contributed to the mounting tensions inside the Bellar home? Carter reviewed Nathan's earlier statements again carefully. Though trauma blurred the boy's memories, there remained something crucial yet elusive. Nathan's repeated mentions of hearing multiple voices on the night of violence continued to trouble Carter deeply. Had someone else been present during the conflict? A person yet unidentified? Someone intimately connected to the Bellars? Someone who knew their secrets? Amid these revelations, investigators revisited the grainy footage from neighborhood security cameras. The shadowy stranger seen lurking near the Bellar home on the night of the crime remained frustratingly unidentified, despite extensive outreach efforts. The figure's timing and movements were far too suspicious to dismiss as coincidence. But Carter understood clearly. Until they uncovered who this mysterious presence was, clarity remained maddeningly out of reach. Tensions heightened within Lakeland, the community's anxiety transforming gradually into suspicion and paranoia. Residents cast wary glances toward unfamiliar faces, doors remained bolted even in daylight, and neighbors whispered anxiously about unseen dangers lurking among them. The town's peacefulness had been fractured, leaving residents painfully aware of vulnerabilities they had previously ignored. For Carter, each passing day intensified the urgency. Every new discovery seemed only to deepen the mystery. Investigators pieced together timelines, alibis, and digital footprints, yet each answer led inevitably to new disturbing questions. The detective felt increasingly burdened, knowing each misstep risked allowing crucial evidence to slip away, forever leaving Wendy's truth hidden beneath silence. As the week drew to a close, Carter felt no closer to identifying the shadowy figure captured on security footage, nor understanding the true depth of Wendy and Troy's emotional struggle. Each discovery cast longer shadows, revealing truths unsettling in their ambiguity. Lakeland, once a town defined by trust and tranquility, now lived under the heavy burden of unanswered questions, its residents left to grapple with a brutal reality they never anticipated. Late one evening, Carter again found himself sitting quietly in his office, surrounded by the scattered remnants of lives tragically cut short. He stared down at a family photograph retrieved from the scene, a smiling Wendy embracing her children, Troy standing protectively behind her. Carter wondered grimly, what hidden truth lay behind their smiles, invisible to everyone who thought they knew them? As Carter set the photograph down, he felt a chill of uncertainty run through him. Each shadow of the past now revealed only deeper mysteries. Yet beneath his exhaustion, the detective's resolve strengthened. The answers existed. He simply had to push harder, dig deeper, no matter how uncomfortable the truth became. He knew clearly that Lakeland would never heal without understanding fully why this tragedy happened. Each piece uncovered would either illuminate the truth or cast an even darker shadow. Detective Carter, burdened but resolute, knew the next revelations might finally break open the case, or plunge them all deeper into darkness. Weeks had passed since the tragedy shattered Lakeland, yet Detective James Carter felt as though he was running in circles, each path ending abruptly, leading nowhere. The peaceful community had become a place haunted by whispers, rumors, and lingering fear. Behind every closed door, in every tense glance exchanged on sidewalks, Carter felt the silent plea of residents desperate for clarity. He knew the truth lay hidden somewhere within the fragments gathered, but precisely where remained agonizingly unclear. One late evening, as Carter reviewed surveillance footage once more, frustration finally gave way to a sudden spark of discovery. Investigators had expanded their scope, obtaining footage from cameras at convenience stores, gas stations, and intersections further out from the Bellar neighborhood. Among countless blurred images and routine activities, one piece of footage seized Carter's attention immediately. A figure matching the vague description from neighbors was captured clearly for mere seconds at a gas station 2 blocks from the Bellar home. On the exact night of the murders, he wore dark clothing, a hood pulled tightly to obscure his features, movements deliberate yet restless, as if urgently seeking to avoid attention. Carter's heart quickened as the stranger climbed into an older, dark-colored sedan, speeding away into the darkness only minutes after the gunshots had echoed through Lakeland. For the first time since the investigation began, Carter felt genuinely hopeful. Here was a tangible lead, a face that might soon have a name. Detectives immediately began painstaking work tracing the vehicle, combing databases for registered owners matching the car's description. Hours later, the effort bore fruit. The sedan was registered to a local man named David Mercer, a former co-worker of Troy Bellar. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces rearranged themselves in Carter's mind. David Mercer had briefly worked with Troy at a construction firm, a position Mercer had abruptly lost months earlier following a bitter workplace dispute involving Troy. Interviews with colleagues revealed Mercer had blamed Troy personally for his dismissal, claiming unfair treatment. The two had exchanged heated words in the office parking lot, a confrontation Mercer left enraged and humiliated. Further investigation into Mercer's background painted an increasingly troubling picture. After losing his job, Mercer's life had spiraled downward quickly. Mounting debts, struggles with alcohol, failed job searches, and growing anger that seemed to focus obsessively upon Troy. Mercer's neighbors described him as increasingly isolated, his once friendly demeanor replaced by bitterness and volatility. Carter noted a disturbing pattern emerging. Mercer had descended into personal ruin, nurturing a resentment that had apparently festered silently for months. As detectives examined Mercer's online activities, the gravity of his fixation intensified. Social media posts, many deleted but recovered through forensic digital analysis, revealed veiled threats and obsessive rants directed vaguely at someone who destroyed my life. Each cryptic message, though never mentioning Troy by name, suggested Mercer had privately blamed him for every subsequent misfortune in his life. Carter's team quickly secured a warrant to search Mercer's home, located in a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of town. As they carefully combed through his possessions, Carter felt an unsettling certainty growing within him. Amid scattered belongings and piles of unpaid bills, detectives uncovered ammunition matching precisely the caliber used in the Bellar murders, alongside maps highlighting routes leading directly to Troy's neighborhood. Yet the most chilling discovery lay hidden beneath Mercer's mattress, a collection of printed photographs of Troy, Wendy, and their home. Carter's pulse quickened as he examined the images. They were recent, clearly captured without the family's knowledge, documenting routines, movements, and intimate details of their lives. Each photograph whispered silent threats, evidence of Mercer's growing obsession. The evidence, though compelling, raised new troubling questions. Had Mercer's rage escalated enough to commit such a calculated, brutal act of revenge? And if Mercer was responsible, why would Troy's death scene be staged as a suicide? Carter felt the familiar sting of uncertainty returning. The crime's complexity still defied simple explanation. Forensics quickly processed Mercer's belongings, hoping for definitive proof linking him directly to the crime scene. Meanwhile, Mercer himself remained conspicuously absent. Investigators could not locate him. His disappearance deepened anxiety throughout Lakeland, as the public wondered nervously if a killer still moved silently among them. The revelation of Mercer's connection to the Bellars brought new urgency and scrutiny to the case, with national media renewing their coverage. Reporters descended once more upon Lakeland, broadcasting developments that thrust Mercer into the public eye as the prime suspect. His photograph appeared on every local newscast, his name echoed anxiously in every neighborhood. Lakeland's fragile calm dissolved further, replaced by palpable fear and suspicion. Residents wondered quietly whether Mercer or someone else entirely remained hidden among them, dangerously invisible. Detective Carter sensed that while Mercer's involvement seemed increasingly certain, troubling inconsistencies lingered, pieces that refused to fit neatly into the emerging narrative. Carter revisited the crime scene repeatedly, his instincts warning him that something crucial still eluded detection. Mercer's obsession with Troy seemed clear, yet Wendy and the children had become victims too, a brutality beyond simple revenge. Why target innocents? And how did Mercer's apparent involvement explain Nathan's haunting descriptions of multiple voices that fateful night? Days passed without locating Mercer, anxiety mounting steadily. Each unanswered question weighed heavily upon Carter, who felt growing pressure from both the public and his superiors to resolve the investigation quickly. But he knew better than anyone. Truth couldn't be rushed. It emerged only in its own time, often painfully slow, hidden among contradictions and carefully concealed motives. As another sleepless night stretched endlessly ahead, Carter carefully studied the photographs discovered beneath Mercer's mattress. The images felt invasive, threatening, and deeply personal, yet they told only part of the story. Carter's mind continued circling a critical detail. Mercer's anger centered upon Troy, yet the evidence suggested meticulous, deliberate planning that extended beyond mere rage. Carter closed his eyes briefly, exhaustion pressing down heavily. He knew this case had become more intricate, more dangerous than initially imagined. Mercer's emergence as a suspect provided vital clarity, yet simultaneously cast darker shadows upon the investigation. Until Mercer was found, until each contradictory element aligned precisely, Lakeland's nightmare would persist, unrelenting in its uncertainty. Detective Carter understood clearly that capturing Mercer represented only one step toward genuine justice. Beyond Mercer's apparent guilt lay deeper mysteries still unsolved. Carter remained determined to untangle the truth, however twisted, painful, or dangerous it might become. In every criminal investigation, there is a moment when science speaks louder than suspicion, a point where cold, impartial evidence reveals truths that emotions or instincts alone cannot. For Detective James Carter and the town of Lakeland, that critical moment had finally arrived. The spotlight turned from elusive suspects and ambiguous theories to the cold precision of forensic science, bringing both hope and heightened dread. Days after discovering the disturbing link between David Mercer and the Bellar murders, Forensic experts meticulously analyzed every shred of physical evidence collected. Detective Carter waited anxiously, knowing the results could either confirm suspicions or plunge the investigation into deeper confusion. Every passing hour felt heavy, underscoring the urgency for answers as the community's fear intensified. In a brightly lit lab miles from the crime scene, forensic technicians painstakingly reconstructed the violent night at the Bellar residence. Bullet trajectories, blood spatter patterns, and trace evidence were examined again with microscopic attention to detail. Their findings would rewrite assumptions that had dominated public opinion, and perhaps even Carter's own perspective of the case. The first crucial revelation emerged from ballistics analysis. Technicians confirmed the bullets extracted from the victims matched precisely the ammunition found at Mercer's apartment. Each bullet carried the unmistakable markings of the firearm discovered near Troy Bellar's body, linking Mercer directly to the murder weapon. Yet rather than providing clear resolution, this finding complicated the narrative further. If Mercer had committed these crimes, why was the gun found carefully staged beside Troy? Was Mercer framing Troy, or had someone else interfered? Blood evidence deepened the mystery further. Forensic analysis indicated the presence of another unknown blood sample at the crime scene. Subtle, almost missed initially, yet undeniably present near a broken window through which Nathan had fled. Carter's pulse quickened as he realized the implications. This unknown DNA profile belonged neither to the Bellar family nor to Mercer. It suggested yet another participant, unseen and unidentified, leaving Carter feeling simultaneously exhilarated and unsettled. Detectives quickly expanded their focus, re-interviewing neighbors and conducting additional forensic sweeps in search of overlooked clues. The unknown blood sample hinted at confrontation, struggle, perhaps even injury sustained by an unidentified intruder. Carter found himself reconsidering Nathan's fragmented memories, multiple voices, shouting, panic, and wondered grimly if the boy's testimony was finally beginning to align with scientific fact. Meanwhile, digital forensic analysts uncovered another critical clue. A recovered message thread from Wendy's cell phone showed a desperate exchange with a number previously unidentified. The messages, short and increasingly frantic, referenced an imminent confrontation. "He's here. I don't know what to do," followed quickly by, "He's angry. I'm scared." The timing of these texts matched precisely with the moments leading up to the tragedy. Yet the phone number belonged neither to Mercer nor Troy. As technicians traced the unknown number, they uncovered yet another disturbing link, one tied directly to the Bellar family. The number belonged to Daniel Hartley, Wendy's distant cousin who had briefly stayed with the family months earlier. Hartley had a troubled past involving minor arrests and substance abuse, and had quietly moved away after a heated argument with Troy, who had insisted Hartley leave their home. Carter felt a chill of realization. Had resentment driven Hartley back into their lives, culminating in violence? Hartley's sudden emergence as a person of interest compounded the already dizzying complexity of the investigation. Detectives scrambled to locate him, only to discover he had also vanished days after the murders. His disappearance mirrored Mercer's own sudden absence, adding urgency to the search. Was Hartley an accomplice, an instigator, or simply another tragic victim caught in violence that spiraled far beyond his control? As Carter grappled with these revelations, forensic teams made yet another unsettling discovery inside Mercer's abandoned sedan, found hidden in a remote wooded area near Lakeland. Blood evidence recovered from the interior matched precisely the mysterious sample found at the Bellar crime scene. This crucial finding confirmed what Carter had feared. Mercer was involved, yet he had not acted alone. Lakeland's anxiety escalated rapidly with news of multiple suspects still at large, prompting heightened security measures, increased police patrols, and community meetings filled with tense discussions. Each new revelation amplified public fears, tearing deeper into the fabric of trust that once bound neighbors together. Carter knew clearly that only full transparency and swift resolution would restore the town's fractured sense of safety. Driven by mounting pressure, forensic investigators returned once more to the Bellar home, re-examining every corner with renewed determination. In a final, meticulous sweep, they uncovered something previously overlooked, A torn piece of fabric caught beneath furniture near the broken window Nathan had used to escape. Lab analysis soon identified the fibers as matching clothing belonging to Daniel Hartley, linking him undeniably to the crime scene. Yet despite growing forensic certainty, Carter struggled with troubling doubts. Evidence tied Mercer and Hartley directly to the murders. But how exactly had events unfolded within that home remained distressingly unclear. Why had Wendy and the children become victims if Troy was the primary target of resentment? Why had Troy's death been staged ambiguously? Each answer seemed only to raise darker questions, each revelation deepening rather than clarifying the mystery. Carter stood silently in the lab late one night, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily upon him. The forensic discoveries offered pieces of truth, yet also exposed deeper, disturbing layers of complexity. Science had illuminated facts, yet motives remained hidden within shadows only human emotions could fully reveal. For the detective, the investigation now stood at a critical juncture, its resolution tantalizingly close, yet maddeningly elusive. He understood clearly that capturing Mercer and Hartley would be merely one step toward genuine justice. Behind physical evidence lay tangled relationships, hidden resentments, and unspoken fears. A human drama far more complicated than forensic facts alone could explain. As Carter left the forensic lab, stepping into the cold darkness outside, he felt profoundly uneasy. Lakeland's tragedy was no longer just a brutal crime. It had become a haunting puzzle of motivations and betrayals, and he knew the final truths, when revealed, would likely prove as disturbing as the crimes themselves. The investigation into the Bellar tragedy had reached its breaking point. Detective James Carter felt the strain of weeks spent chasing elusive shadows, piecing together fragments of a puzzle that refused easy completion. The evidence now painted a picture both complex and unsettling. Multiple suspects, unclear motives, and secrets buried deeper than anyone could have imagined. Lakeland's once tranquil community was desperate for answers, and Carter knew the time had come to face the most troubling questions head-on. Days after forensic revelations tied David Mercer and Daniel Hartley to the crime, investigators received an unexpected tip. Hartley had finally surfaced, caught on surveillance at a motel nearly 50 miles away from Lakeland. Within hours, a tactical team apprehended Hartley without incident, bringing him into custody under heavy guard. His capture was swift but strangely quiet, offering no immediate answers. Hartley appeared shaken, yet defiant, unwilling at first to speak. Carter felt a surge of cautious hope. Hartley represented the potential key to unlocking the mystery that had tormented Lakeland. However, his initial interrogation yielded only vague denials and fearful silence. Yet under the weight of compelling forensic evidence, Hartley's resistance soon collapsed into a narrative that would shatter every assumption Carter had made. Hartley confessed reluctantly, describing how desperation had led him back to Lakeland. After losing his job, Hartley had returned seeking help from Wendy, who secretly offered assistance without Troy's knowledge. He admitted that on the night of the murders, he'd come to the Bellar house after receiving frantic texts from Wendy, begging him to intervene in a domestic confrontation, spiraling dangerously out of control. Upon arrival, Hartley found chaos. Troy enraged, Wendy terrified, and the children caught in between. Before he could act, violence erupted, sending Hartley fleeing through the same window Nathan later used to escape, cutting himself on shattered glass. Hartley's story, while partially believable, still left critical gaps. Questions Carter pressed relentlessly. If Hartley had fled in fear, who was responsible for the murders? Hartley's answers led inevitably back to Mercer, whose bitter vendetta against Troy had evolved into something far darker. Mercer, Hartley claimed, had been lurking outside, driven by revenge, and seized the violent moment as an opportunity. Hartley insisted he had fled immediately, abandoning Wendy and the children in panic, haunted by guilt ever since. Yet Carter sensed something troublingly incomplete. Mercer's involvement made sense, yet Hartley's frantic explanations failed to address why the scene suggested deliberate staging. Why would Mercer meticulously arrange Troy's body to appear as suicide if revenge alone drove him? Carter's doubts deepened, fueled by instinct warning him that a darker truth remained concealed. Days later, another tip shifted everything abruptly. Mercer himself had been located, found hiding in an abandoned property just outside Lakeland, alive but desperate. Mercer surrendered quietly, his demeanor weary rather than defiant. In interrogation, Mercer revealed a startling version of events, a truth that was darker, more troubling, and ultimately devastating. Mercer admitted confronting Troy that night, driven by obsession and rage over losing his job and dignity. However, upon entering the home, Mercer claimed to find a scene already unfolding violently. Troy wielding a firearm, Wendy pleading desperately, children terrified. Mercer described a moment of confusion, an unexpected struggle between himself and Troy, shots fired wildly in panic. Horrified, Mercer fled, leaving behind chaos he insisted was not fully of his making. Detective Carter felt the narrative growing tangled, each suspect implicating the other, leaving no clear answers, until a critical piece of evidence emerged. Technicians recovered a previously unnoticed digital recording from a hidden security device Troy had secretly installed inside the house weeks earlier, driven by paranoia and jealousy. As Carter reviewed the footage privately, his pulse quickened. It revealed a painful, undeniable reality. Troy himself had initiated the violence. Driven by jealousy over Wendy's secretive communications and increasing resentment toward Hartley, Troy had confronted Wendy violently. Mercer and Hartley's arrivals, unplanned and tragic coincidences, escalated a volatile situation beyond control. Mercer's intervention triggered a desperate fight, the gun firing chaotically. Ultimately, Troy fatally wounded his own family members before sustaining a self-inflicted injury that left him dying, but not immediately dead. The shocking twist left Carter stunned. Troy, once perceived as victim or innocent bystander, had initiated and executed the horrifying crime. Mercer and Hartley, while deeply flawed and culpable in their own actions, had stumbled unknowingly into a violent scenario Troy had created. The staged suicide scene, initially baffling, now emerged as Troy's final act of manipulation, an attempt to control the narrative even after death, shifting blame onto others who had unwittingly become part of his tragedy. Carter stood alone, absorbing the brutal truth he now had to share publicly. The community's anguish, already deep, would intensify with this revelation. Troy, a man trusted and admired by many, had betrayed everyone. The investigation had uncovered not a single villain, but multiple tragic figures, each victimized by their own desperation and fatal flaws. In the days following this revelation, Lakeland wrestled painfully with its new reality. News reports conveyed the haunting truth, and residents grappled with the uncomfortable complexity of human frailty. Mercer and Hartley faced justice for their roles, though neither had anticipated the devastating chain of events set in motion by Troy. Carter himself was left haunted by the revelation, realizing clearly how thin the line between victim and perpetrator, between innocence and guilt, truly was. The Bellar tragedy now stood as a grim reminder that beneath the quiet surface of any community lay hidden vulnerabilities capable of erupting with terrifying unpredictability. Carter knew clearly that justice, however necessary, would never fully heal the wounds inflicted that night. The truth offered clarity, but also left permanent scars, reminders of how quickly trust could unravel and how swiftly violence could replace compassion. As Carter packed away the last pieces of evidence, he felt deeply changed. The Bellar case had shown him clearly that the human heart could harbor unimaginable darkness beneath ordinary appearances. Truth was complex, rarely comforting, and often devastating. Yet in confronting uncomfortable realities, Carter hoped Lakeland might slowly rebuild trust, one cautious step at a time. The revelation of Troy Bellar's role in the tragedy left a wound in Lakeland too deep to heal quickly. The community, once bound by neighborly trust and a collective sense of security, now found itself fragmented, each household grappling quietly with shock, betrayal, and grief. The Bellar home stood silent, its windows dark, curtains drawn permanently, serving as a somber reminder of how swiftly life could descend into chaos. Detective James Carter struggled to find closure. In his career, he'd witnessed countless tragedies, but none haunted him quite like this. Weeks had passed since the truth emerged, yet sleep rarely found him. Each restless night brought vivid images: Wendy's desperate eyes, the children's innocent faces, in Troy's masked darkness. Carter realized grimly that although justice had been served in the eyes of the law, emotional resolution was far more elusive. Nathan Bellar, the sole survivor, moved quietly away to live with distant relatives, leaving behind friends, school, and the memories that would never release their grip. Though physically unharmed, Nathan carried invisible scars far deeper than anyone could understand. Carter often thought about the boy, wondering how Nathan would reconcile the painful knowledge that the man he called father had orchestrated the nightmare that destroyed his family. David Mercer and Daniel Hartley faced separate legal reckonings, their roles acknowledged, their punishment accepted. Both expressed remorse in their own broken ways. Mercer devastated by the realization that his obsession had inadvertently accelerated the tragedy. Hartley shattered by guilt, haunted by his cowardice on that fateful night. Neither would ever fully escape the echoes of their choices. Lakeland residents wrestled openly with their newfound vulnerability. Neighborhood watches formed, security systems became commonplace, and doors remained cautiously locked even during daylight. Yet beyond physical changes, a deeper transformation occurred quietly in households across town. Neighbors spoke more candidly, listened more carefully, checked in more frequently, conscious of how easily hidden pain could escalate silently. Months after the tragedy, Carter visited the Bellar home one final time, drawn by a need for reflection. Standing alone on the overgrown lawn, he observed how quickly nature had begun reclaiming the space. Grass grew wild, weeds stretched upward, life quietly persisted. Yet the house itself remained unchanged, its silence profound. He knew the physical evidence would fade, but emotional remnants would linger indefinitely. Carter thought deeply about the intricate web of motives and circumstances revealed by the investigation. The subtle fractures in relationships, hidden resentments, financial anxieties, jealousy, pride, all ordinary human vulnerabilities that had combined disastrously. He understood more clearly than ever that the line separating good from evil, victim from perpetrator, peace from violence, was dangerously thin. Every person carried hidden darkness. Every relationship harbored risks unseen until tragedy forced them into view. Lakeland eventually found its path toward healing, though slowly and painfully. Public memorials honored Wendy, Ryan, and Zach, allowing collective mourning to begin reshaping sorrow into remembrance. Community gatherings gradually shifted from tense suspicion to honest discussions about mental health, family violence, and the silent pressures that fester beneath outward normalcy. Local schools launched counseling initiatives, churches held open forums, and neighbors began building connections founded not on superficial interactions, but genuine care. From tragedy arose cautious hope, a communal resolve to confront hidden struggles openly, rather than silently enduring until crisis erupted. Yet for Carter, personal peace was harder to achieve. Even after retirement years later, the Bellar tragedy revisited him often, resurfacing quietly in contemplative moments. It had taught him invaluable lessons, lessons he would carry permanently. He knew now that justice, while crucial, could never fully mend broken lives or restore lost innocence. True healing required deeper honesty, compassion, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths before tragedy unfolded. Years later, Carter received a quiet letter from Nathan, now a young man, finding his own voice amid ongoing struggles. Nathan thanked Carter, writing simply, "I understand now that my father's actions do not define who I am. My future belongs only to me. Your pursuit of truth gave me the courage to face my own. Thank you." As Carter folded the letter carefully, he felt unexpected comfort. In the darkest tragedies, small rays of resilience still emerged, reminders that hope could survive even when overshadowed by unimaginable pain. The Bellar case had forever changed Lakeland, had forever changed him. Yet through the pain, through the difficult truths revealed, Carter recognized clearly the importance of confronting hidden struggles with honesty and courage. While tragedy could strike anywhere, true strength lay in how individuals and communities chose to respond, moving forward together, wiser, more vigilant, and deeply aware of the human heart's fragile complexity. As he walked away from the Bellar home one last time, Carter felt a quiet resolve. Though some wounds might never fully heal, lessons learned through pain could inspire compassion strong enough to prevent future suffering. In remembering clearly what happened in Lakeland, he hoped others might find courage. Courage to face truths openly. Courage to seek help before desperation overtook reason. Courage to build stronger communities defined by empathy rather than tragedy. In the end, the Bellar family's story became more than a cautionary tale. It became a powerful call for awareness, honesty, and compassion, resonating quietly but persistently throughout Lakeland and beyond, a legacy of resilience in the face of tragedy. Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe, follow us, and leave a comment. It truly helps us keep bringing you gripping and thought-provoking true crime stories.